Hello, Namaskar students. Now we come to the next part of sexual reproduction, that is the events in sexual reproduction. The sexual reproduction in all organisms can be divided into basically three events. The first event is a pre-fertilization event, then the fertilization and the post-fertilization events. So, let us begin by understanding that what are the various pre-fertilization events. Pre-fertilization events involve the formation and the dispersal of the gametes. So, it includes basically gametogenesis. Gametogenesis can be defined as the process of production of gametes. Now, the gametes that are found or that are formed in lower organisms, they are usually morphologically and also physiologically identical. Now, such gametes are found in organisms like Eulothrix. Such morphological and physiologically identical gametes are termed as isogametes. So, if these are the two gametes, they are morphological also similar and physiologically also similar. Next type of gametes are morphologically similar but physiologically they are a little different. Such kind of gametes are called physiological anisogametes, and these are found in Spirogyra. Third type of gametes are anisogametes. Anisogametes are the gametes which are morphologically may be similar but they are different in their size, and they can be seen in organisms such as Chlamydomonas brunei. So, how do they look like? So, we have one gamete and another gamete. So, they are morphologically same but they differ in their size. Whereas an isogamete, they are morphologically same and only they are different in their physiology. So, if these are two gametes, same but they are different in their size. Basically, it is seen in the filamentous algae, that is Spirogyra. So, probably we should not represent it in this manner. There are other organisms in which there is a lot of difference in the morphology as well as the physiology of the gametes. Such gametes are called as heterogametes, as seen in most of the plants and animals. How are they? So, there is a large egg cell or the ovum and a smaller, the male gamete or the anthrozoid. So, the female gamete is called as the ovum and the male gamete is also called as the anthrozoid. So, this is the female and this is the male. I hope you are aware of these symbols used for females and this symbol is used for representing males. Heterogametes. Now, in individuals like human beings where the female gamete is larger in size and non-motile, in that case, and the male gamete is smaller in size and it is motile, that kind of gametes are called as oogametes. They are called as oogametes. Oogametes can be seen in human beings also. So, depending upon the size of and the physiological functions of the gametes, we have isogametes, we have physiological anisogametes, oogametes and the heterogametes. After this, let us move over to the sexuality in organisms. Now, how is the sexuality in organisms defined? There are certain organisms in which the gametes are derived from parents which are morphologically the same. Rather, we can say when the gametes are derived from the same parent, those kind of organisms are called as homothelic, and this can be seen in certain lower alga. So, the sexuality of the organism can be classified into homothelic organisms in which the gametes are derived from the same parent. So, gametes, same parent. Then the second are heterothelic. Heterothelic are those organisms in which the gametes may be derived from similar parents, but there is a difference in their physiology of the two parents. They are heterothelic. So, there is a difference in the physiological difference in parents. Example of homothelic individual is nuker, and that of heterothelic example is Rhizopus, stolonifer. Okay. Now, after these simpler organisms, sex organs have developed in higher organisms. Now, those who have sex organs, naturally the male sex organs produce the male gametes and the female sex organs, they produce the female gametes. The flowering plants in which both the sexes, the male sex organ and as well as the female sex organs, when they are present in the same flower, that condition is known as hermaphrodite flowers, or they are called as bisexual flowers. Fine. So, you must be knowing the examples like the China rose, the rose. All of these, they have flowers which have both the male and the female sex organs in the same flower. Now, among the plants, there are certain individuals in which there are distinct male flowers and female flowers. These male flowers are also referred to as staminate and the female flowers as pistillate. The plants such as cycas, which belongs to gymnosperms, and papaya, which is an example of an angiosperm, they have separate male plants and the female plants. The male plants only bears the male flowers and the female plants bear the female flowers. Such kind of condition where the male and the female flowers are borne by different plants, it is called as, such plants are called as dioecious or unisexual flowers. On the other hand, there are other plants like cucurbits in which the same plant bears separate male and female flowers. Those kind of plants are called as monoecious. Fine. So, the example of dioecious plants would be cycas, which is a gymnosperm, and it would be papaya, which is an angiosperm. There are many more. This is just for giving you an example. And in the monoecious plants, where on the same plant we have separate male and female flowers, the example is cucurbits. All the melons and they all belong to the cucurbita family. Ghia that you eat, the pumpkins, all of them, they belong to the cucurbit family. So, all of them, they have the monoecious condition in them. There are certain animals also which are hermaphrodite or bisexual, such as the tapeworm, leeches, earthworm. They are bisexual or hermaphrodite. Whereas there are other animals like the cockroach, they have separate male and female. Human beings, we are separate male and female individuals. So, they are said to be unisexual, or they are said to have different distinct sexes. Next we come to the cell division during gamete formation. So, this was about the different types of plants and animals and their classification based on the origin of their gametes, or from where the gametes are formed. Now, cell division during gamete formation, one thing we need to understand is that the organisms that belong to algae, those that belong to fungi, those who belong to bryophytes, all of them, they have haploid plant bodies, whereas all the animals, gymnosperms, gymnosperms, pteridophytes, angiosperms and animals, all of them, they have diploid body structures. Okay. So, considering that the gamete have always to be haploid in structure, fine, because they should have a single set of chromosomes in them. So, gametes are always haploid, irrespective to the fact whether they are derived from a diploid structure or a haploid structure. All gametes must undergo fertilization and give rise to a structure which is diploid. This diploid structure may divide to give rise to a haploid individual, or may further undergo to form diploid structures, that is different in different organisms. And another thing, that meiosis is one kind of cell division that occurs in all sexually reproducing organisms, and meiosis occurs in the cells which we termed as meiocytes. Now, depending upon which cells act as meiocytes, we can say that the meiosis can be of three types. First is the zygotic meiosis. What is zygotic meiosis? This is seen in lower algae, where the zygote acts as a meiocyte, and the meiosis takes place in the zygote and it gives rise to, so the zygote undergoes meiosis and it gives rise to the cells which form the new individuals. The second kind of meiosis is the sporic meiosis. In sporic meiosis, this is usually seen again in some of the algae and in the bryophytes. What happens, and in most of the plants rather, many plants they have the sporic meiosis. So, what happens in sporic meiosis is that there are specialized structures which are called as sporangia on the body of the organisms. The cells of the sporangia, they act as meiocytes. Meiosis takes place in these meiocytes and it produces haploid spores. These haploid spores then give rise to new individuals or germinate to form the gametophyte or the haploid individuals, which later on by mitosis produce the gametes. So, this kind of meiosis is called sporic meiosis. Fine. Then the third type of meiosis is your gametic meiosis. Gametic meiosis takes place in the organisms in which the body of the organisms is diploid majorly. And this kind of meiosis takes place in those organisms which have sex organs. These sex organs are also diploid, and the germ cells which have to form the gametes are also diploid. So, here the germ mother cells, they act as the meiocytes. So, what are the meiocytes here? The germ mother cells which are present inside the, where are they present? Inside the sex organs. So, they act as meiocytes and meiosis take place and haploid gametes are formed. So, these are the three types of meiosis depending upon which of the cells is going to act as the meiocyte. So, when zygote acts, it is the zygotic meiosis. When the cells of the sporangia act as meiocytes, it is the sporic meiosis. And when the germ mother cells, they act as the meiocytes, it is the gametic meiosis where gametes are formed. After the formation of gametes has taken place and different types of gametes are formed, the next step is the fertilization. Now, fertilization is the most important event after the formation of the gametes. Depending upon the habitat of the organism and the mechanism of the fertilization may vary. The fertilization can take place internally. We can have internal fertilization or we can have external fertilization. External fertilization is common in organisms which live in aquatic habitat. For example, the algae which are living in water, the bryophytes, the fishes, frogs, they all have external fertilization. In external fertilization, what happens? That if the two gametes are isogametes, we discussed that before, that is that if they are morphologically similar and both are motile, then the two gametes, they swim towards each other and fertilization takes place. In cases where the female gamete is non-motile and lodged in the female body and the male gamete is we can say motile, it is motile, then what happens? There are certain mechanisms that the individuals have developed wherein they lodge the male gametes very close to the female gametes or wherever the female plant is, so that the fertilization can be helpful or can be easily done. In other cases like the bryophytes, they also need, even if they grow on land, they need a thin film of water through which the male gamete can float and reach the female gamete. So, in that case also the male gamete is lodged in the archegonia, the female gamete is lodged in the archegonia and the male gametes, they swim towards the female gamete and see to it that a fertilization takes place. You must have realized that in external fertilization, the number of chances of failure are much more. Why? Because the male gametes have to reach the female gametes and see to it that fertilization takes place, though there are certain attractants that are secreted by the female gametes which attract the male gamete towards itself, but still in all these cases where the fertilization is external, the number of the male gametes that are produced is always large. In case of isogametes, where both the gametes are given out in the water and fusion takes place in the water, both male and female gametes are kind of released in the water. In them, the female gametes are also large in number, the male gametes are also large in number. But in cases the female gamete is securely lodged in the female body, in that case usually the female gametes are lesser in number as compared to the male gametes. Next type of fertilization is internal fertilization. Many of the, except those which are living in the aquatic habitats, there are many more animals, the organisms, where internal fertilization, including plants, where internal fertilization takes place. All the gymnosperms, the angiosperms, in them the internal fertilization, the animals' internal fertilization takes place. So, internal fertilization is facilitated again by various agents. For example, if we take the example of the plants, in them the male gamete is lodged in the pollen grains, and the pollen grains, they are produced in some plants and then they have to kind of be shifted or transferred. So, pollen grains containing the male gametes have to be transferred to the female parts of another plant. In that case, what happens, the agents such as water or wind or sometimes birds, certain animals, they help in this process, and this process is known as pollination. Pollination is the process of transfer of the pollen grains from one flower to another, and this can be seen in where cross fertilization in plants take place. Whereas there are also some plants which undergo self-fertilization, though this is rare as compared to the cross-fertilization, but in plants such as pea, wheat, in the closed bud condition, by certain mechanical movements, the male gamete from the pollen grain is transferred to the stigma of the flower. Now, how this pollination takes place, how it facilitates cross fertilization will be taken up in detail in the chapter sexual reproduction in flowering plants. So, I will be leaving it here for a while. So, we can say that fertilization is of two types, internal fertilization and external fertilization. And one more point I would like to cover, that in cases of internal fertilization also, where the pollen grains or the male gametes have to be transferred to the female gamete, there also the number of the pollens produced or the male produced is always, male gametes produced is always larger as compared to the female gamete. Even in human beings, if we compare, even in human beings, for one ovum that is released in the female, 100 to 400 million gametes, male gametes or the sperms are produced at one time. So, you can see the number of male gametes compared to the female gametes, and there is a lot of wastage during fertilization takes place, and all this is done to ensure that the chances of fertilization is more and more. Next we come to parthenogenesis. Now, what is parthenogenesis? Parthenogenesis is uniparental sexual reproduction in which any one of its gamete, usually most of the times it is the female gamete, that forms a new individual. Now, this kind of reproduction, parthenogenesis, is found in aphids, honeybee, and so on. So, these are the few examples of parthenogenesis. Now, next we come to the post fertilization events. Now, fertilization has taken place. After fertilization, the two gametes, they fuse and they give rise to the zygote. The zygote is the most important product of a sexual reproduction. Whatever the size of the individual, the zygote which is formed during sexual reproduction is single-celled in all individuals, irrespective of the size. Now, depending upon whether the zygote undergoes a resting period or it does not undergo that resting period, we can say that there are different types of life cycle. First type of life cycle is the haplontic life cycle. In haplontic life cycles, they are commonly seen in the lower algae and certain bryophytes also. The haplontic life cycles in which the zygote, after formation, it gets covered by a protective layer and forms the zygospore. The zygospore undergoes a resting period, and in the next season or when the favorable conditions are there, the zygospore, it undergoes meiosis, forms the haploid individuals. So, this is called as haplontic life cycle. The second kind of life cycle is the diplontic life cycle. In diplontic life cycle, the zygote does not undergo any resting phase. It immediately divides to give rise to an embryo which forms the whole individual. This kind of life cycle is called as a diplontic life cycle, as found in all higher plants, in all the animals. We all follow the diplontic life cycle. The third type of life cycle is diplohaplontic life cycle. In diplohaplontic life cycle, what happens is that the zygote once formed, it germinates to give rise to, does not undergo any resting phase, it forms a sporophyte or a diploid individual. These diploid individuals later they form the undergo meiosis and then they form the gametes, and these gametes then they germinate to give rise to the haploid individuals. So, there is a kind of two types of individuals in the life cycle, the diploid individuals or the sporophyte and also the haploid individuals. But in this case also the zygote, it does not undergo a resting phase. So, that is diplohaplontic life cycles, and it can be seen in the bryophytes, in the pteridophytes, the diplohaplontic life cycles. After the zygote has been formed, it undergoes, the next step takes place in the post-fertilization changes, that is embryogenesis. Now, what happens in the embryogenesis? The zygote undergoes multiple mitotic divisions and an embryo is formed. The number of the cells increases, cell differentiation takes place, and all the parts of the new organisms are formed. Various internal as well as external structures are formed in the process called as morphogenesis. Now, depending upon whether this embryo is protected within the mother's body and nourishment is provided to the embryo, to the growing embryo or not, the animals can be divided into three main types, and that is, first type is your oviparous animals. These are the animals like birds which lay the eggs, and in them the embryo development takes place outside the body of the female. The second type are the ovoviviparous. These are the animals like the rattlesnake and the sharks, in which the egg develops inside the female body, but it does not derive any nutrition from the female, and they also give birth to the young ones. The third type is the viviparous animals. These are the animals in which Usually these are the placental animals, and there is a placenta formed from where the growing embryo derives nourishment, and these animals give birth to young ones. So, viviparous, and the human beings, they are viviparous in nature. As I told you, ovoviviparous are the rattlesnakes and the sharks, and oviparous are the animals such as birds that lay eggs, or the amphibians and the reptiles, they all are oviparous. So, depending on whether the embryo, how the embryo is developed, they are of three types. The animals are of three types. Last we come to the seed and fruit formation. In the plants also, the embryo develops. So, what happens in the plant? That the ovary, it disintegrates. There is a structure called as endosperm in the plants, which provide nutrition to the growing embryo. The ovules, they get transformed into the seeds, and the ovary forms the pericarp, which acts as a nourishment for the growing seeds, and this is how the fruits are formed. So, the seed and fruit formation will be again taken up in detail in the next chapter, that is sexual reproduction in flowering plants. So, seed and fruit formation, what all we have covered? We have seen that the seeds are formed from the ovules, and the fruit or the fruit body is formed from the ovary, which disintegrate to form the pericarp, which is the cover, and the seeds are lodged in it. Now, depending upon the type of ovary, the fruits are of different types. The seeds are present inside the fruit in different arrangements, and that will be dealt in detail in the next chapter. Thank you, students, for understanding this. And before we leave, let us see the various things that we have discussed today. We have understood what are the pre-fertilization events, how the gamete formation takes place, what are the different types of gametes that individuals have, how the gametes are transferred from the parent, the male parent to the female parent, and how the fertilization is facilitated. The different types of fertilization we saw, internal and external. We discussed a bit about the parthenogenesis, the post-fertilization events, which includes the formation of zygote, how the embryo develops in an individual, and how the seed and fruit formation takes place. Thank you very much.